Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our Canva Live workshop today. We're so thrilled to have you joining us. For those of you that it's your first time, you're brand new, Canva Live is home to all of our workshops, webinars, and all of the tools for our Canva community. That's you. To find out about upcoming events, just head to canva.com/events, where you'll find a range of interactive content designed to empower our community to get to designing. It's so nice to meet you guys. My name is Katie, and I am presenting today from sunny Austin, Texas. In today's webinar, we're going to be exploring all things storytelling. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to take a deep dive into how storytelling can help you and your nonprofit, the art and science of storytelling, what a story is, and the key elements that move it along and help it connect with your audience, and how to tell a story through videos and images using Canva. We'll get very, very hands-on in this workshop. So we have tools and resources that you can use for your own storytelling projects. We have some workbooks that we're going to be sharing with you during this session. So if you'd like to design along with us, that's great. Just make sure you're logged in to your Canva account so you can open up the workbook and design along with us next to the webinar screen. Joining us today, we have enlisted experts Arturo and Eddy to learn about telling your story in a way that connects with your audience and how you don't need a whole studio of expensive equipment to create impressive video content. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Arturo. I'm a designer and a design educator at Canva, and I have over 8 years of experience working in the nonprofit sector. Throughout my career, I've helped many nonprofits and international organizations tell better stories.
Hey, I'm Eddy. I'm a videographer here at Canva. I've been with Canva for about 3 years now, and I'm really excited to share some tips and tricks with you on how you can bring your content to life for your not-for-profit.
Oh, that was so helpful. Okay, so before we get started, I want to know from you guys, what's your favorite story and why? Can you think of a campaign that really resonated with you? I'll give you an example. One that stands out to me is a campaign from the 2016 Summer Olympics. P&G ran an ad that put a spotlight on strong mothers and the obstacles they had to overcome to raise strong female athletes that are now performing in the Olympics. And this really, really resonated with me and helped me feel connected to not only the cause, but the athletes in the Olympics. All right, so that brings us to part one of this workshop, storytelling for impact. So it's time to hand it over to Arturo to explore what we mean by storytelling for impact.
Stories are a great way to connect with your audience. Whether you're talking to donors, volunteers, allies, policymakers, and staff, stories are an incredibly powerful tool. In fact, if you're a nonprofit, stories should really be the foundation of your communications. By telling a compelling story, you can create impact. By telling a compelling story, for example, you can get people excited about your cause and move them to action. You can get them to care and get involved, either by donating money, signing a petition, volunteering, or spreading your message across their networks. And today, we'll be looking at how stories can help you do all of these things. But stories can also be used to show impact. We often focus on metrics and timelines, we report on results and indicators, but in doing so, we often lose sight of what those numbers actually mean. And stories help us do just that. They help us demonstrate that what we do actually works by showing the difference that our work makes in people's lives. It essentially humanizes what we do and the people we do it for. And if I haven't convinced you yet that stories are a great way to create and demonstrate impact, studies have shown that as much as 56% of nonprofit followers take action, like making a donation, for example, after they've seen a compelling story from a nonprofit they follow on social media. There are many types of stories that you can tell. We have, for example, creation or origin stories. These stories let people know why your nonprofit exists and how it came about. But we also have what we call community stories. A community story is essentially a story that humanizes your community by showing a side of reality that people may not see. And this can be a great way to change narratives or bridge gaps between communities, for example. Then we've got impact stories. These stories are all about the change that you've brought about in your communities. How is the world a little bit better because of your work? Then we've got behind the scenes stories. And these stories are about the people that make what you do possible, the behind the scenes of your nonprofit, as it were. These type of stories are a great way to humanize your nonprofit and show that it's about people, not only the people that you serve, but also your staff and your volunteers. And then finally, we've got user-generated stories. These are stories from your community, people that follow you, people that support what you're doing, and people who have a very strong connection with what your nonprofit does and what it stands for. And stories can be told in so many different ways and using so many different tools and so many different formats. We can use videos, for example, but we can also use just words by writing a blog or a newsletter article. We can use photography. Let's think about social media and how we can tell stories through photography. We can have podcasts and just use sound to tell a good story. And then we can mix all of these different formats and all of these different tools to tell multimedia stories. And today we'll cover some of these formats. And in particular, in the second part of the webinar, we're going to focus on how to tell great stories using images as well as videos. And we're going to tap into some of the great tools that Canva has to offer.
Okay, so now we know a little bit more about what stories can do and the types of formats that nonprofits can use for effective storytelling. So let's do a quick check, you guys. How good do you think your nonprofit is at storytelling? What types of stories do you guys usually tell? Let us know, do you use stories to create impact or to demonstrate impact, or a combination of both? Finally, what formats do you use to share your story? We're going to see how a large nonprofit organization creates impact through storytelling. UNHCR is a UN refugee agency. They're a global organization working to save lives and protect the rights of refugees, internally displaced communities, and stateless people all over the world, of which currently the estimate is 84 million. Let's listen to Chris Reardon, Head of Global Communications at UNHCR. In this video, he shares with us why storytelling is so important and how to tell a good story.
UNHCR has a lot of data. We have biometric data from registering individual refugees in Jordan on up to global scale figures of the total number of forcibly displaced people in the world, which is at a record high. But in all of these numbers and all of this data, there's one figure that always stands out for me, and that's the number 1. Through all of this, we're talking about people, we're talking about individuals. And so when we talk about data, we also want to talk about the people that data represents. I took my title for this talk actually from a poem by a Polish poet. The main thing here is that the big numbers, people can't relate to them. And what they can relate to is one, if Polish poets don't do it for you, maybe Mother Teresa does. She also says, if I look at the mass, I will never act, but if I look at the one, I will. If that's not your thing either, maybe a psychologist, Paul Slovich, who says, the more who die, the less we care. And what's interesting is that Slovich says that really psychic numbing begins as soon as you jump from 1 to 2. So even talking about 2 people, you've already made it harder for the reader or the viewer to relate to what's going on in your story. In a lot of our storytelling at UNHCR, we focus on the individual. We try to tell these individual stories as a way to bring people in to understand what's going on in different parts of the world. There's a lot that's standing in the way of us being able to get the public support to help refugees. So the question for us is, how can we get people to step across that gap, that empathy gap, and find a connection with refugees, find a connection with that issue? And so one way we do that is by telling individual stories. I mentioned before that we like to find someone who has survived a lot, but has that drive, that spark, that resilience. And I think Esther really encapsulates that. She fled South Sudan as a child. She missed several years of school, and yet she's a star student, head of her class, wants to become the first neurosurgeon in South Sudan. By telling her story, it's a way to draw attention to those needs of education that can also help bring along all of her peers. This is Rifai. He's a scientist and an engineer and wrote a textbook in Syria that was used at universities. He designed and built his own home, and it was bombed in the conflict, and his wife, his daughter, and 5 other family members were killed. He and his surviving children fled to Turkey, where he was not able to find work, even though the university was teaching the textbook that he wrote. At the time, the resettlement issue was getting very politicized, and we wanted to show, well, who are these people who are in line for resettlement? Let's tell some of their stories. This one in particular, Rifai was resettled to Michigan and invited to the State of the Union address by the White House. And this is Panagiotta. She is the Greek grandmother, 82 years old. She lives in Idomeni, Greece, and would take refugees into her home and let them use her shower to take showers and feed them lunch, feed them dinner. We felt that her story really showed the welcomer, someone receiving refugees into their community with open arms, with an open heart, with an open door, and looking at what's possible when that's our response instead of throwing up barriers. Yusra was a teenager who fled Syria. She was a competitive swimmer back in Syria. And so we followed her story. She wanted to be in the Olympics. At this point, it wasn't known whether or not there would be a refugee team. There had never been a refugee Olympic team before. There was some talk of it. But we followed her story to find out what is it like to be an 18-year-old competitive swimmer who had hopes, and then a conflict tears your country apart. And now you've got to start over and learn a new language and try to rebuild your dream. There was a refugee team created for the Olympics, and Yusra did make the team. And here she is at the opening ceremony. Team Refugees really encapsulated the resilience of refugees. I mean, these are people who have left everything behind. They've been separated from their communities, often from family members. Careers, educations, everything interrupted. Some of the runners on the team had never run with shoes before. And here they were able to go and be part of the Olympics. Sapur also fled South Sudan. He fled as a child, and in fleeing was separated from his family for, I think, over a decade, has not known if his mother is alive. He doesn't know if she knows if he's alive. He doesn't know if she's alive. And his biggest hope with going to the Olympics was that maybe she'll see me. Maybe she'll see me and know that I'm alive. And for him, that meant more than anything. And she did not see him, but someone who knew her in South Sudan heard about the Olympics and saw something that the South Sudanese guy was running and recognized him. A phone call was arranged from South Sudan to Rio, and he spoke with his mother for the first time since he had fled as a child. That, I think, also shows you the power of these stories, that even for the refugees, telling their story and helping them have a chance to show what they've been through and to simply to show that they're alive can change their lives.
That was so impactful. I think Chris is just such a skilled storyteller. And personally, I found that really moving. Stories influence people, their behaviors, their emotions and actions in a way that facts and figures just never will. Let's do a quick test. Okay, how many of you remember how many refugees there currently are? All right, but how many of you can remember Pure's story on how he got to reconnect with his mother in South Sudan? One of the great things about storytelling and why they work so well is that they help us remember information. We tend to remember a good story way longer than we remember facts or figures. We can say that we are hardwired to respond to stories. Let's find out a bit more about why stories are so powerful and learn about the art and science of them. Time to pass it back to Arturo. He's going to dive into the art and science behind storytelling.
We've always used story to pass down wisdom through the millennia. Back in the Stone Age, our ancestors would sit around a fire after coming back from their daily hunt, and they would share stories of how they encountered lions or hyenas. And through their experience, other people in the group learn how to survive and not get eaten by wolves. Sharing wisdom and valuable lessons through stories is an art that we've perfected over hundreds, if not thousands of years. And stories are all around us even today. Still today, we engage with stories all the time. As Jonathan Gottschall said, we live in stories all day long, we dream in stories all night long, and stories are essentially how we communicate, how we connect with each other, how we learn, how we think. Actually, we engage in storytelling more often than we might think. Whenever we meet with friends or family, for example, as much as 65% of our conversation is made up of personal stories and gossip. So, stories are a great tool for passing down information and making it easier for others to remember this information. But there's more to stories than just this. More importantly, stories change how we behave. And many studies have looked into how stories affect how we act. So let's take a look at the science of storytelling. There was a study by Adam Grant, a professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. And the study focused on fundraisers who worked at the university call center. And a bit like non-profit fundraisers, these guys reached out to alumni to ask for donations. And in between shifts of phone calls, this group of fundraisers were given a 10-minute break, and during this break, they got to meet a student that had directly benefited from the donations that they brought in through that work. The student told them the story of how the scholarship it received had changed his life. A month after the experiment, the researchers found that even though the fundraisers were using the same script for their phone calls, they were spending 142% more time on the phone and collecting 171% more revenue. Even though the script hadn't changed, the study shows that hearing personal stories is a great motivator. Meeting a student and seeing the impact that their work had on a real human being motivated them to do more, even though they weren't aware of it. Another really interesting study from Princeton University showed how stories literally change the chemistry of our brains. When we hear a story, our brain activity mirrors the brain activity of the person who's telling us the story, with just a few seconds delay. So for example, if a story includes details about movement, somebody running for example, the motor cortex in our brain lights up as if we were the ones moving or running. And the same thing happens with smell and other senses too. So when we hear about things like facts or figures, there's only a very specific part of the brain that gets activated, our language processing part. But when we're listening to an actual story, many other parts of the brain light up as well. Stories essentially activate what is known as mirror neurons. And if you think about it, we all experience this when we go to the movies. When we watch our favorite character fighting for that life on the movie screen, we feel that fear and anxiety as if we were the ones being attacked. Stories essentially tap into our empathy, our ability to walk in other people's shoes and feel what they feel. Or to use a more scientific word, this phenomenon is known as neural coupling. So what does this mean for nonprofits? Well, this is incredibly important for nonprofits because nonprofits are in a way in the business of stories. Nonprofits have all the raw material for powerful stories right at their fingertips. Stories of perseverance, hope, stories of hardships and new beginnings, stories of change and big ideas. And so it's important to learn how to turn all of these ingredients into powerful stories so you can get people to connect with them emotionally and take action.
Okay, on to part 3. So now that we know why stories are so powerful, the next question is, how do we create a story that is both compelling and memorable and also conveys our message in the exact way we want it to come across? We asked Arturo to explain to us the key elements we need to consider when we are crafting the perfect story for our nonprofit. As he talks through them, I want you to be thinking critically about how your favorite stories and how these elements that he's going to explain apply.
When you analyze a story, any story, you'll realize that all stories need 4 key elements to be compelling. They need a central character, a structure, a good combination of logos, pathos, and ethos, and details. So let's take a look at each of these 4 elements. The first element is the central character. This is your protagonist, the person that is central to the story. As Chris said before, it's easier for the audience to connect with a single, specific character rather than a vague group of people or an abstract idea. So it's best to focus your story on one person's experience. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't have other characters or other voices in your story, but it's important to make sure that there is one main character, somebody that your audience can identify with or cheer for. So when you're thinking about your story, here are some key questions to ask about your main character. Who are they? What is their context? What do they desire? What do they believe in? And what do they see, hear, experience, or feel? Asking these questions up front will help you develop your character and how they fit into the broader story. The second element is a story's narrative structure. At their very core, any story, whether it's a book or film, is about things happening, characters doing things and solving problems. So at their very core, stories have a problem-solving structure, which we usually call a narrative structure or a narrative arc. There are many types of narrative structures. A classic one, and perhaps the most famous narrative structure, is the hero's journey. The hero's journey was invented by Joseph Campbell, an American anthropologist who reviewed dozens of myths and stories from many different time periods and many regions of the world. And he found that all of these myths, all of these stories, all share a similar structure, which is made up of 4 key phases, which can be further broken down into 12 steps. So from King Arthur to the Netflix series that we watch every night, all stories tie back to this fundamental structure. We've got phase 1, which starts in the ordinary world, where life goes by as we know it. Then something unexpected happens that disrupts this order. It's a so-called call to adventure. Our character is prompted to go on a journey or confront a difficult situation, and this is what sets the rest of the story in motion. Then we've got phase 2, which is when our character decides to take the plunge. They rise to the challenge, so to speak, and decide to go on that adventure that they've been called upon. So in a way, they cross the threshold, often with the help of a mentor. Then the next phase, phase 3, is all about the ups and downs, the tribulations that the character goes through throughout that journey. They may win some battles, but they will also experience setbacks. And this is where the real transformation happens in the story. The character realizes something important about themselves or about life. They're not the same person anymore. And finally, in phase 4, the adventure comes to an end. This can be a happy end or a not so happy end. Think Titanic, for example. But in either case, a new order is established. An order that's different from the initial status quo that we had at the beginning of the story. Something has changed forever, either outside the character or within the character. Things are not the same anymore. Of course, not all stories follow exactly the same plot. Some stories are told chronologically, some other stories may move back and forth in time, but beyond these specifics, all stories include these phases. Let's take, for example, a classic story, The Wizard of Oz. I'm sure many of you will have seen the movie or read the story as children. Dorothy, the main character, lives on a farm in Kansas. This is the initial context, one that Dorothy isn't too happy about. She feels unappreciated by her family and dreams of exploring the world, somewhere over the rainbow. Then, one day, a cyclone happens, and this is where she crosses the threshold, and her journey starts. She's dropped into a world of magical creatures, and she makes friends, and together with these friends, they set off on a journey to find the Wizard of Oz, who has the power to send her home. She also makes enemies along the way, like the Wicked Witch, who wants to stop her from going home. After many trials and hardships, Dorothy is back on her farm, and she returns home, but she's not the same person anymore. She's learned that she's found in herself the strength to face all of these challenges, and that she didn't need the wizard after all to go home. She has all the qualities she needs to rise to the challenges that life is going to throw her way. And The Wizard of Oz is just one example of how we can find the hero's journey in most of the stories that we consume every day. So when you're working on a story for your nonprofit, think about how you can apply this narrative structure to your story. Ask yourself, what's the initial situation? What's the turning point in the story? What's the sudden event that sets the story in motion? What's the conflict within the character or external outside of the character? What are the ups and downs that the character goes through? The third element of a good story is actually made up of 3 elements. These are logos, pathos, and ethos. These words were used for the first time by Aristotle, a Greek philosopher who studied the art of telling stories and the art of persuasion. So if you want to tell a powerful story, a compelling story, you need to make sure that it has a combination of these 3 elements. Logos means reason. This is basically the logical part of your story, how the events happen in a sequence and build on each other, the narrative structure that we talked about just a second ago. But logos can also include all the facts and all the figures that we may want to weave within our story. For example, some statistics or some data that we want to highlight. It's that part of our story that has to do with factual information, with numbers. Then we've got pathos. Pathos means feelings, emotions. This is the inner world of our character, the spectrum of emotions that they experience as the story unfolds. This could be pride, joy, happiness, anger, sadness, determination, and also the growth that they experience on the hero's journey, how these emotions change as the story unfolds or not. Finally, ethos is to do with values and trust. And this is really what sets apart a story from the rest. What is the moral of the story? What is the deeper meaning of the story? What's the bigger human truth that is revealed? How does the story help us, the audience, understand something meaningful about ourselves or about the world? So when you think about the story that you want to tell, always ask yourself, is there a good balance of facts, data? Is there a logical sequence that keeps a story together? But also, is there an emotional side to my story? Does the story reveal the inner world of my character? And finally, is the story insightful? Does my story reveal something true and universal that can change how people see things? Finally, last but definitely not least, to be truly engaging and cause that chemical reaction in our brains, that feeling of being totally immersed in a story needs to have vivid details, things that evoke our senses and help us feel the story. Think about when you're reading a book. There will be all sorts of descriptions of places, buildings, what people are wearing, how they move, what they eat, descriptions of their facial expressions, and so on and so forth. So capturing sensory details, things that have to do with sound, with touch, with smell, etc., is super important in a story, because these are the details that grab our attention and draw us into the story. They make it instinctively believable. So, for example, if you're making a video story, you can capture a lot of detail in your B-roll. And we're going to talk about B-roll later on with Eddy.
Okay, so now we know the key elements to telling a story. So let's watch a video and see if we can identify these 4 elements. This is a video by World Bicycle Relief. That's a nonprofit that provides communities in developing countries with bikes.
The sunset means the end of the day. Before the end of the day, you must have done a good job so that what you will get will be beautiful. I'm Ramadan Bakari. I was trained as a community health volunteer. We had so many deaths, and that deaths came out of ignorance. I looked to my people in the community and found that most of the people lacked knowledge. We are told to go back and teach education about health to the community.
They play a major role. They have number of households they manage.
I am responsible to 105 households and 522 people. It was a big challenge so far.
They had to work to cover these 100 households. They had to walk.
The farthest place is around 8 kilometers. We could even visit 2 to 3 households, and then we call it a day.
The first month of those bicycles, it was just, wow, the world is now changing.
We reach the sick people quickly. We inform the people, they go for treatment, and you see, even the mode of movement, the mode of transport to the sick person to the facility and to give information is now quick. When I use a buffalo, the sunset will come when I've finished my job well.
That was a great video because even if it's a couple of minutes long, it does a great job of bringing together the 4 elements of what makes a really impactful story. First of all, we have a central character, Ramadan Bakari. And we know from the video that he's a community health volunteer based in Kenya. The video opens up with this very inspiring shot of the sun rising, and he's riding his bike to go help people in his community. We also have a narrative structure. This is what we can define as an initial context, where people die because of a lack of access to healthcare and education. And Ramadan is limited in what he can do as he has to walk miles and miles every day, leaving him to only have time to visit 2 to 3 households. But then there's a turning point, sort of a call to adventure. Ramadan receives a bicycle, and this changes everything. Bernard, the community health manager, drives the point home when he says, the world is now changing. The threshold of change has been crossed. And what follows is a transformation phase. We don't necessarily have a series of dramatic ups and downs. It is only a 2-minute video. But in that time, we can definitely see how the community transforms and is benefited by this nonprofit. Ramadan can now travel farther and deliver goods faster, which results in better healthcare for his community. It makes it possible to create a new order. Now Ramadan can serve his community better, his days are full, and he can go home knowing that he had a positive impact on his community. So we also have a really good combination of logos, pathos, and ethos. So let's break those 3 elements down. Logos. We have, first of all the rational arguments that underpin the entire story. We have a lot of death in his community, and those deaths are due to lack of access to healthcare. We also have the facts and numbers that bring the situation to life. We know that Ramadan has 100 households to take care of, and that before he received his bike, he was walking up to 8 kilometers or about 5 miles a day. Pathos. We see Ramadan's passion and love for his community. We see why he's motivated to make a difference. And lastly, ethos. The video starts and finishes with this beautiful metaphor of the sun rising and setting. When the sun comes up, you know that you have a chance to impact and plant the seed for a better future. So the bigger truth about human nature is an invitation to make our days more meaningful. Let's all go home in the evening knowing that we have left the world in a better shape than we found it in the morning. And of the last elements, but definitely not the least important, we have the details. We see plenty of sensory details in the B-roll throughout the video. We see Ramadan interacting with colleagues and members of his community. We see details of him riding his bike and cameras focusing on his hands. We also see a shot of a malaria kit and children crying in the background. All of these details really convey the reality of what Ramadan does and sees every day. So, as you can see, even in a 2-minute video, all 4 elements of the storytelling are present. A main character, a narrative structure, logos, pathos, and ethos, and details that bring the story to life. Here's another example of a short video about a fictional nonprofit called Ocean.org. This was filmed on an iPhone and then just edited right within the Canva editor. I really hope this illustrates for you guys that you can use the Canva video suite to make your video and tell your story. You don't need an access to expensive cameras or editing equipment.
Hi, my name is Nick and I've been a volunteer with Ocean.org for 4 years. Growing up in Australia, the ocean was a huge part of my childhood, almost a second home to me. I love it so much. The sea has been there for every important moment in my life. I remember weekends on the beach with my grandpa before he passed away. I was also in Sea Scouts for years and I learned new skills with my friends. I loved getting out on the water with my dad for summer twilight sailing too. I remember seeing dolphins for the first time while I was learning to sail, and it was just incredible. I always saw the sea as a second home. It didn't occur to me that it could be under threat. In my early 20s, I took a trip to the Great Barrier Reef and I was devastated. Seeing the impact of plastic pollution made me realize just how fragile our oceans are. Our oceans are under threat from overfishing, pollution, climate change, and more. 80% of marine pollution is because of human activity. Coral bleaching, sea level rise, we're doing this to our oceans and it's up to us to change it. It can be as simple as picking up plastic waste on the beach. I was certain I wanted to be a part of the solution, and that's why I signed up to volunteer for Ocean.org. We work incredibly hard to clean and protect the oceans and all the animals that call it home. Through Ocean.org, I met other volunteers who are just as passionate about protecting what's close to our hearts, our marine life and waters. We go out into the ocean whenever we can, we run beach cleanups, and we educate local communities about marine wildlife and what all of us can do to help protect it. Being part of Ocean.org for me is about doing what's right. It's about honouring my memories and making sure generations after mine can call the sea their second home, just like I did.
Okay, so pop quiz. Who is the protagonist in this story? And what do they desire? What do they believe in? What do they see, hear, experience, and feel? You got it. Nick is the protagonist, and he believes that we should take care of our marine life and oceans. A lot of personal memories are connected with the sea. The sea is like a second home to him. So, what is the structure of this story? Nick spent his childhood in the sea. That's the initial context. The turning point happened when he saw that the ocean was being polluted. This is what motivated him to take an action. It motivated him to change his habits and seek out an organization that could help him. In this instance, Ocean.org. That's where the transformation happens in our video. Now, another pop quiz. What is the logos, pathos, and ethos in this story? So as we all know, the logos are the facts, numbers, reasoning, and we have a bit of that in this story. Nick tells us that 80% of marine pollution is because of human activity, and we're also responsible for the cause of coral bleaching and the rising sea levels. We also have quite a bit of ethos too. These are feelings and emotions. Nick shares his memories of going out to the sea with his grandfather and spending time on the beach with friends. Like we said, it's like a second home to him, and he's devastated at the thought that we're destroying it. Lastly, what are the pathos? Pathos is all the values and insights into the human experience. We can see that Nick realizes that we all have to play a role to save our oceans. Protecting the ocean means protecting our collective past and future. And that's why joining an organization like Ocean.org is so important. In your storytelling workbook, there's an activity to help you reflect on how this relates to your story. Now, to access the storytelling workbook, you can scan the QR code that is on the screen right now and just download your copy. Activity 3 in your workbook looks like this. This is your reflection exercise. Who's your main character in your story? What's your one perspective that you could use to communicate what you do? And can you think of an example of your impact? And can you turn that into a story of someone that you've helped through an initiative that you've run? This is an exercise for later. We're not expecting you to complete it now. So save this and come back to it after the workshop. I hope you find it really helpful. Now, this is the fun part. Part 4, storytelling through images. Now that we understand the construction of a story, it's time to explore the different ways of telling that story. We're going to look at how we can use both images and videos to communicate a story effectively. We'll start by exploring storytelling through images.
So as we said, stories can be told in many different ways, and I'd like to focus on images first. There is so much that we can tell through just pictures. This photo is a great example of how a whole story can be told with just one image. This is Rosa, an 85-year-old woman, and we see her embraced by a nurse in a care home in Brazil. The photo won the World Press Photo Contest in 2021. It brings us back to the beginning of the pandemic. Back in March 2021, care homes across Brazil had closed their doors to visitors because of COVID. Millions of people couldn't visit their elderly relatives, and carers were told to limit physical contact with the vulnerable to an absolute minimum. At this care home, they came up with the hug curtain, a simple but ingenious invention that gave people a chance to hug each other again. This hug that you see in the picture was the first hug that Rosa got to experience after 5 months of complete isolation. We can all relate to the feelings of fear, loneliness, and helplessness that we felt in those months, but also the feeling of joy and relief when we got to experience physical proximity again with the people that we love. These pictures here are from Rise for Justice, an awareness campaign by One Family People, an NGO in Sierra Leone. One Family People works to change misconceptions and stereotypes around disabilities. Traditionally, in Sierra Leone, people with disabilities are excluded from family portraits. And this campaign flips this narrative and shows a series of real people with disabilities. Contrary to what usually happens in Sierra Leone, this time they got to choose how they'd like to be represented. They chose the positions, the clothes, the settings, and their attitude as well. These photos are celebratory. They showcase their unique personalities and their unique abilities, and communicate strength as they stand on an elevated pedestal. And speaking of great photography, we were able to catch up with Rena Effendi, an incredible documentary photographer who's won many awards and documented incredible stories of conflict, social justice, and the environment. And we asked Rena to share with us how she uses photography to tell incredible stories. So here's Rena for you.
My name is Rena Effendi. I'm a social documentary photographer and I tell my stories with photographs. I use storytelling as a platform for advocacy around issues that I find very important, be it social justice, environment, or conflict. I believe that a human story, if told beautifully and responsibly, can be a vehicle for social change. It can inspire positive action. Storytelling allows me to connect with people and expand my own horizons. It gives me a glimpse into the worlds and cultures I would otherwise not be exposed to. So I share these stories with others. One of the most important things I learned in photography as a storyteller is to be less judgmental, and I hope that my work can educate and inspire others to be open-minded too. A single photograph is a moment of history frozen in time. It does not only illustrate or document a particular event, it also encapsulates a vast range of feelings and emotions. A series of photographs is a visual narrative which can lay out a story in a captivating sequence. I often think of it as a storyboard for a film. It will have an establishing shot, which will give us a sense of place, a beginning of the story. It will have the main lead, which is a portrait of a character whose actions and emotions we're witnessing. It will have a point of climax and final resolution. A few years ago, I worked on a story about a family, but it was also a story of leadership, tenacity, and kindness in the most unlikely places, and it all revolved around a single man. On assignment for the Wall Street Journal, I followed Patricio Galvez, a Chilean-Swedish musician and poet, a father of 3 and a grandfather of 7 children. I went alongside Patricio on his quest to rescue 7 of his orphan grandchildren from captivity in Syria. In 2014, Patricia's daughter Amanda married a Swedish radical Islamist who became a notorious militant recruiter for ISIS. She and her children followed him into Syria, where they joined the organization. Ultimately, both Amanda and her husband were killed in airstrikes as the coalition forces took over Raqqa in 2019. The children survived the violence and ended up in Al-Hol, a sprawling and hostile refugee camp. For months, Patricia tried to persuade Swedish authorities to help him repatriate the children and bring them back to safety. But they adamantly refused until a media campaign brought the issue to the forefront of public attention. I can now proudly say that putting a human face on this story contributed to what happened in the end. Under mounting public pressure from the media campaign, the Swedish authorities finally caved in and facilitated the release and the expatriation of these children from the Syrian camp. These innocent children, traumatized by war and loss of their parents, are now safe and thriving while being looked after by their loving foster families in Sweden. My tips on how to tell a good story through photography are the following. 1. Research the subject well before embarking on a story. This knowledge will deepen your understanding of local culture and sensibilities. 2. There is no need to rush. Spend time with the person or community whose story you're trying to tell. Stay close, be courteous, and try building rapport. This will help win the trust of the people you're trying to photograph. 3. Keep in mind all the different elements you need in a story. Establishing shots, action, emotion, character portrait, environment, and details. 4. Aim to have different types of shots. There should be close-ups, mid-range shots, and general views. The visual narrative has to be dynamic and not monotonous. If there's any repetition, it must be deliberate. It has to be part of the story. Otherwise, it flattens the story. For me, a great photograph is not only aesthetically pleasing, but also thought-provoking and sometimes even haunting. The more emotion I see in a photograph, the more I can read into it, the more powerful and interesting it becomes. I love photographs that are layered, where I'm gripped by the things happening in the foreground, but I'm also intrigued with the background. These layers are often interconnected.
Wow, Patricio's story is a great example of how you can tell a deeply moving story through photos. Having the right images to tell your story is essential, but perhaps you don't have a professional photographer or the budget to get one. That is okay, we have you covered. At Canva, our aim is to empower you to tell your story regardless of your budget. This means creating content that is relevant and diverse, so you can find content to support your cause whenever you need it. We also want to empower the photographers whose work we use in Canva and that you can find there. We had a chat with Candy from our visual content team to tell us more about how we ensure diversity is both in our content and in our pool of photographers. Let's take a look at what happens behind the scenes of our content library.
Hi, I'm Candy. I'm the lead for elements in the visual content team at Canva. We created Canva with the mission of empowering the world to design. With a global community spanning more than 190 countries, this means having content that represents the unique and vibrant world around us. Our content library touches all Canva users, and we're striving to build a library that represents and celebrates every single one of them. Building representation and diverse narratives in our free content library is a key area of focus for Canva users. Canva's Fund for Diverse Creatives is key to our responsible production of diverse and inclusive photography, illustration, video, and animation. We can achieve this by working with an ever-growing community of creatives around the world. Each one of us sees the world through a different lens, and that lens is defined by our life experiences, our identities, and our beliefs. It shapes how we see and experience the world. We gravitate towards great stories told by great storytellers. So, more often than not, our worldviews will be shaped in part by the lens of a camera and the storyteller behind it. Not only do we want to capture stories from varied communities, but also the stories of the creatives behind the lens. So, through Canva's Fund for Diverse Creatives, we're commissioning artists to tell their authentic stories. Beyond this standalone project, Canva Content has been engaging more than ever with creatives globally to help build our free elements offering for specific communities. Recently, we've produced high-quality, hyper-localized collections for India, South Korea, Indonesia, Colombia, Turkey, the UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. All produced by local creatives featuring local talent, locations, food, events, styling, cultural trends, and truly local narratives. As the number of global creatives we engage grows, so does the number of perspectives we can showcase in our core content of graphics, photography, video, and animation. This includes continually diversifying our most popular content and resolving content gaps. This season, our Elements team has aligned with our non-profit templates designers on specific campaigns including Ukraine aid, chronic illness, and period poverty. As we grow, it's important that we engage in a two-way conversation with our users. We offer all users the ability to submit in-product feedback when they can't find what they're looking for. We also regularly audit our content for specific search terms, and we've launched a report an image function, allowing users to provide direct feedback on inappropriate content. Addressing inclusion and diversity needs to be a human-centric approach. It's about people, and storytelling is one of the most universal human experiences. It shows us the world through a new lens and allows us to build a shared understanding.
We are always growing our content library, and we'd love to know, what are you looking for? Anything you'd like for us to add or consider for the Canva photo library? Okay, so now you know how impactful it can be to tell your story primarily through photos and images. Video is another powerful medium for storytelling that I'd really encourage you to get familiar with. Which brings us to the second section of part 4. Let's take a look at the power of video to reach your audience. Did you know video is the most popular content format on the whole internet? Over 500 hours of video is uploaded to YouTube every minute. A study by Google found that 57% of people who watch a video for a nonprofit go on to make a donation. Without a doubt, video is an incredibly powerful tool that you can use to snare the attention of your audience, bring your cause to life, and make that move to ask for donation, fundraising, or sign up as a monthly reoccurring giver. I want to know a little bit about your experience creating video. I bet we have a lot of people here with an array of experience. So let me know in the chat. First of all, did you even know that you can create videos and edit them in Canva? Have you ever created a video before? If not, I know it sounds daunting, but we're gonna do our best to make it seem easy. And lastly, how confident are you in your video making skills? While you're letting us know in the chat, we're gonna move on to the next section, where we'll start to learn how Canva can help you craft your story. One of the amazing things that you can do in Canva is create videos. Our video suite comes with plenty of tools, such as recording, editing, adding music, animations, anything you need to create your video for any platform. That, combined with our content library, gives you everything you'll need to really bring your stories to life. Our in-house video editor, Eddy, is here to show us the ropes. She's going to take us through some top tips to ensure you shoot great footage. Then she'll take you through 10 steps to master your Canva video skills so you can create an impactful video. Now, there is a video workbook for that part of the session, so look out for that link on screen in the resources section. Okay, over to Eddy. She's going to walk us through making great footage on a budget.
Hey, video is a powerful medium to communicate your story. As a nonprofit, it makes sense to harness the power of video to get your message out to as large an audience as possible. So let's explore how to create videos using Canva. Firstly, I'm going to take you through the essential elements of video storytelling to help you plan what content you capture, so that you can use your time as efficiently as possible. Then I'll show you how you can use Canva's video suite and content library to build on the footage you capture to create a 90-second video quickly and easily. Okay, so firstly, what are the essential elements of video storytelling that are important to consider before you head out with your crew to capture content? Storyboarding. Plan your shots. It's important to storyboard out what you're filming in advance as much as possible. This will save a lot of time on the day. Get to know your script and figure out what B-roll will complement different parts of the script. Shoot engaging B-roll. B-roll, also known as color or overlay, is basically any footage that's going to be laid over your storybed or clips of your speaker, aka your A-roll. Don't let B-roll be an afterthought. Take the time to plan out what B-roll you're going to capture. One way to make your B-roll engaging is to use movement. Some simple camera moves you can try are pans, aka rotating side to side, or tilts, aka tilting up and down. These two movements are particularly great for establishing shots and vast landscapes. Make sure your shots are relevant and complementary to the overarching message. If the shots aren't relevant, they may actually be distracting and detrimental to your content. Zoom versus slide. Compare this slide movement to the zoom on the previous page. Take a look at how elements within the space interact with each other here, versus how flat and 2D a zoom looks. As viewers, we feel more like we're there in the room. Quick note, always film for a few seconds longer than you think you need. Trust me, it'll help you out later. Sound. Capture good quality audio. The quality of your audio can make or break your content. Try to find a quiet area, pause for planes and buses, and consider purchasing an affordable, phone-compatible lapel mic. Lighting. Shaping your light can be the difference between content looking average or looking cinematic. Use whatever ambient light you have and consider investing in a simple ring light or reflector. A reflector, or flecky, can be used to bounce light from an existing source onto your subject. These are particularly useful outdoors for bouncing light from the sun. And if you have no other light source, use the sun. Leverage your aspect ratio. Different social media platforms use different aspect ratios. Keep this in mind while you're filming and either shoot with enough room to crop your shot or simply rotate your phone or camera and film the shot again. Framing and composition. Try to make it so that when your audience looks at your shot, they know exactly where their eye is meant to go. Try reducing clutter, using directional lighting, using your depth of frame, and using shallow focus. The space around your talent's head is known as headroom. Make sure they're not swamped or looking tiny in the frame, but also be careful not to chop their head off. Quick note, you may want to intentionally leave room for graphics, but plan this out in advance. That's all the tips for today. Let's move on to part 2, creating your video.
Wow, those were some really great tips for capturing great footage. Once you have your footage, it's time to compile your best clips within Canva. The first step is to upload your footage into Canva so it's ready for you to pull into your video project. Then you'll choose a template to start from a blank video canvas. Here's Eddy again to show you how you can make edits in the initial footage on Canva and make sure that you have the best takes ready for your project.
So now you know how to capture great footage. Now I'm going to show you how to edit it all together in Canva. Before we begin, you'll want to make sure you upload your brand assets into BrandKit. So let's take a quick look there. As you can see, we've got all of our Ocean Org assets ready to go. Now, let's open up a video template. Looking at the user interface, if you're familiar with Canva, you've used this before, but you haven't used the video templates before, you may notice the editor does look a little bit different. Down here we have a play button, we have this, which is called the playhead, and we also have scene view down here, where we'll place our video clips and move them around. It's kind of like one clip equals one slide in a presentation. That's an easy way to look at it. So I've added the footage onto my timeline. Now I'm going to create a single file by cutting the best clips together. So the first thing I notice when I look at this is this horizon here is a little bit off kilter. I didn't notice it at the time, but it's pretty obvious to me now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my rulers and guides and pull this down to about here. And now I'm going to try and straighten it up Automatically, that just looks loads better. And now, of course, I'm going to expand it so that it takes up the whole page. And we can drop those rulers and guides now. Looking good. Now we want to trim down the clips. So we can play through a little bit and try to find about where Nick starts speaking. And now we just drag the timeline in and it snaps to fit.
Hi, my name is Nick and I've been a volunteer with Ocean Org for 4 years. Growing up in Australia, the ocean was a huge part of my childhood, almost a second home to me. I love it so much.
So you can see there that he stops to take a breath, and we don't want to include that in the finished video. So you just right click, split page, and then you can just adjust it so that you're just getting the good bits.
The sea has been there for every important moment in my life. I remember weekends on the beach with my grandpa before he passed away. I was also in Sea Scouts for years and I learned new skills with my friends. I love getting out on the water with my dad for summer twilight sailing too.
And again, we're going to split the page there so that we can cut out this little pause.
Seeing dolphins for the first.
When you've edited the clips to remove all the footage you don't want, export the project to turn it into one long video file. You can then re-import the file into a new project for part 2 when you create your video story.
That was great. So that's how you compile your best clips from footage that you filmed. To create great video content in Canva, you'll need to master 10 essential skills, including how to add B-roll, music, sound effects, animation, and this will help you create a great story. We asked Eddy to step us through the skills, and we've created a video workbook for you to use on your own for practice. This workbook contains some of the footage from Nick from Sea Org with an intro template and an outro slide for you to practice on. We've also shared the storyboard we use so you can practice referring to it as you create. To open these resources, you can type in the bit.ly links on the screen now, or just click on the link in the resources tab. We've also included these links in your storytelling workbook as well. So if you already have that open, go ahead and go to page 15 and 16. Feel free to practice along with Eddy's video, but if you don't get to everything, don't worry. This workbook is yours to keep to practice on for as long as you need.
I'll talk you through the 10 steps to master the skills you'll need to make your story. You can practice along with me, but don't worry if you don't get everything done. The workbook is yours to keep, and you'll also get a recording of this session so you can review the steps in your own time and at your own speed. Step 1, add video to a template. Change the background video of the template's first scene. Search for a suitable video from the video library and just drop it in. Adjust the length of the intro clip if needed. You can change the title and subheading at this point too, and apply your brand kit fonts if you have them set up. Step 2. Use rulers to straighten the horizon. Click on the second scene. Pull in a ruler like this to fix the tilted horizon. Step 3. Resize the video to fill the screen and set it to be the background. Lock the video so you don't accidentally click it and move it. Step 4. Consult your storyboard. Your storyboard will remind you what B-roll you originally planned. Scene 2, long shot, childhood beach, where Nick says, growing up in Australia, the ocean was a huge part of my childhood, almost a second home to me. I love it so much. So use spacebar to play and stop the clip, and S to split the clip when Nick pauses. For example, after Nick says, for 4 years.
Hi, my name is Nick and I've been a volunteer with Oceanorg for 4 years.
Split the clip again at another pause, for example when Nick says, "I love it so much."
Growing up in Australia, the ocean was a huge part of my childhood, almost a second home to me. I love it so much.
Now you have created a short scene, which we'll add B-roll over. Step 5, add some B-roll. Add a frame to hold the B-roll footage. Search for a grid like this square one that we can resize. It drops in the same size as our video frame, but you can resize it or move it if you want. You can see the original footage is still there. We're adding this in as it will sit on top of our initial footage so we can keep the same audio narration. Now this is really important. Before you add your B-roll, check how long your original clip is. We'll need to match that duration to our B-roll after we've added it, otherwise the scene will extend to the duration of the B-roll clip. Now search for some B-roll in the video library and choose some that you think is suitable. Drop it in. Click on it and click the scissors to change the duration of the B-roll to match the original clip. If your B-roll clip has its own audio, just mute that if you don't need it. And voila! Now you have B-roll whilst keeping the original narration.
Hi, my name is Nick and I've been a volunteer with Oceanorg for 4 years. Growing up in Australia, the ocean was a huge part of my childhood, almost a second home to me. I love it so much.
Keep doing this until you're happy with the flow of your video and keep referring to your storyboard for suggestions on what to add and where to add further B-roll. Quick tip, don't use shots longer than 20 seconds or so and break up long clips by adding B-roll, switching angles, zooming in, or otherwise visually breaking up the scene. This will just make the whole story a little bit more visually interesting for audiences. Step 6, add and edit background music. Search through our library of audio tracks and add them into your video. Background music can help set the tone of your video and help tie clips together. Take the time to find music that really matches the mood of your video and switch up the music if the mood changes throughout. I already did a search and I like one called Breathe One's Last. You can trim or select a section of the track if it's too quiet at the start, for instance. In audio effects, you can fade in or fade out a track. You can adjust the volume up here so it doesn't compete with Nick's voice. You can also have multiple audio tracks. For example, if you had your own recorded narration, you could upload it here and add it.
Hi, my name is Nick and I've been a volunteer with Oceanorg for 4 years. Growing up in Australia, the ocean was a huge part of my childhood.
You can also search for sound effects. So for example, try adding a wave crashing at the start and end. Now you have a go finding some background music and adding it to your project. Step 7, add captions. Did you know that 85% of videos viewed on Facebook are watched without sound? So it's really important to add captions to videos, especially if you're uploading a video to Facebook. It also makes it more accessible. So we're going to transcribe what Nick is saying. Hi, my name is Nick and I've been a volunteer with Oceanorg for 4 years. Add some text and type in the words. Shrink this down and fit it in the title safe area. Change the color so it's more visible, or try text effects like lift, which gives it a slight drop shadow. You can increase the intensity. Experiment with fonts so it doesn't overpower the visuals, e.g. Roboto Condensed is a good one. Another way you can make it stand out is by adding a rectangle and then drop the transparency. This makes the captions really easy to read. Step 8. Include a call to action, or a CTA. At the end of your video, provide some action that your audience can take, whether it's clicking a donate button or following a link to your nonprofit's website. You could resize a social post to add as your CTA. We've added one here for you to practice on. I'll change the color to match. Step 9. We're going to add animations to any static images. I'll select all of these elements, press animate, and have a look through the different options that we have. Some of these are free, some are pro. I love Breathe, which is free. And for the Oceanorg logo, I'm going to do something a little different from the rest so it stands out. I'm going to give that one a rise. That's looking great. Step 10, share. When you think you're finished, watch it all back to check that you're completely happy with it. Then you can share it with the world. There are many ways to share your video, including downloading it and sharing it straight to your socials. Happy creating!
That was so good. Guys, I really hope this helps you feel empowered to tell your story and to use Canva to help you share your story with the world. Remember, the workbook is yours to keep, so you can do these activities whenever you have time. All the steps are in the workbook and you can recap them whenever you need. Now, it's nearly time for us to wrap up, but before we go, Arturo wants to summarize what we've learned today. Take it away.
Stories are powerful things. They help us make sense of the world, and they also help us see the world through another person's eyes. Telling a good story is both an art and a science. You need to have empathy and a good understanding of the human experience, and you also need to be able to plan your story and put it together. Last, but definitely not least, as nonprofits, you need to be aware of the power of the stories that you put out into the world. As storytellers, we don't own the stories that we tell. We are simply creating space for other people's stories to be shared more widely. And in doing so, we can help shine a light on inequitable systems and injustices all over the world. We essentially hold up a mirror to the complexities of the world. So it's really important that we don't just see stories as ways for asking for more money, and that we approach storytelling in an ethical way, in ways that are not exploitative or patronizing or even harmful. For example, when we're creating a story, there are a few things that we don't want to do. We don't want to show people in one-dimensional ways, as victims, for example, without any agency over their lives. We don't want to perpetuate stereotypes by showing only one aspect of a person or a community. We don't want to re-traumatize people when we ask them to share their often painful experiences that they may have been through. And lastly, we want to make sure that their identity is protected and that they are fully aware of the implications that sharing that story may have. So, in addition to the art and science of storytelling, we should also always think about the ethics of our stories and how we go about creating them. We don't have time to go into details, but we've put together some resources and some exclusive content to help you think all of this through, so you can be truly intentional about designing your next story. And we can't wait to see what stories you're going to bring to life next.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. But really, this is just the start. Here's some resources to help you tell your story and to support your work as a nonprofit. We know we've shared a lot of links with you today, and we're about to share some more. So we've compiled everything I'm about to mention in one handy resource site. So don't worry about copying everything down. All the different websites, they're all linked in one handy resource page, which you can access by scanning this QR code. First up, we've included a link to your workbook that we've mentioned several times throughout this event. Here you'll find plenty of exercises that will help you break down stories and create your own. We've also included an extra section on ethics of storytelling, with plenty of resources to help you think through your own unique approach to stories. So, speaking of stories, guys, we regularly spotlight stories that have impact on our Canva blog, and we would love to spotlight you guys. Yours could be next. If Canva's helped your nonprofit reach major goals, maybe that's raising money, getting volunteers, engaging your community, bringing an event to life, we would love to spotlight you with that. Let us know through the form here on the screen. Again, you can scan this QR code. We'll feature the best stories in one of our blogs. Also, you can go to canva.com/nonprofits to apply for Canva Pro for nonprofits if you haven't done so already. For more events like this and other workshops, visit canva.com/events. Check out our upcoming schedule. For advice and feedback, make sure you sign up for Canva Nonprofit Community Group on Facebook. Hope to see you there. Thanks again so much for joining us today. We hope to see you at another live event very soon. Bye, everybody.